Yeah, no, I'm so excited you're with me today. Honestly, I am really reaching out to a lot of people from the Minnesota area and trying to get Minnesota knitters, Minnesota designers, just to come on the podcast. So not only selfishly, so I can get to know people a little bit better, but also just for my community, that we can kind of talk about the lovely knitting community that is in Minnesota, right? Like there are so many yarn stores, so many knitting groups. We have a really strong guild. And I know that Brienne, I should just introduce you briefly. This is Brienne Moody, and you live way up north. And so you don't get to interact with a lot of that. I know that that is, different for you, but Brienne is a pattern designer, sewer, runner. I have a list here, writer, into craftivism, Hackschooler in Grand Marais, Minnesota. She has 59 designs on Ravelry. She does a lot of things with slip stitches and mosaic. She has cowls, hats, and sweaters. She was published in Laine Publishing's Neon and Neutrals book, as well as she has patterns for the Reluctant Swatcher, which I think is awesome. So welcome to the iRock Knits podcast.
Thank you, Cori. Thanks for the introduction. It's fun to hear how someone else summarizes what I do. I appreciate that.
Well, I went to your blog and you have a little list. And then I watched a podcast that you were on many years ago with Squam.
Oh,
and
yes.
I listened to that, which was lovely. And that was like 8 years ago, maybe something like that. Maybe even 9. It said, I think it was maybe your kids were very young at the time. So it was kind of prior to you designing your first pattern, which was interesting to me because I got to hear about how you started with bags and an Etsy shop. So why don't you introduce yourself a little bit better than I did and tell people where you started and, how you got into the business. I know your family, they were all kind of crafters, and living up north, you live far away from resources, some resources. You have other great resources like forests and water and things like that. But
yes, we have great natural resources and limited access to capitalism, really. So I guess as a kid, the 2-lane road going to Minneapolis, I probably only made it to the Twin Cities, closer to where you live. It's about 5 hours from where I live. So I probably got there maybe 7 times, all through high school. We had just a 2-lane road leading up the North Shore. We had one radio station from Wisconsin. So then I guess what you end up with is sort of, you're lusting after what you don't have. I always say that I started designing to solve a problem. And so I really wanted access to fashion. I was interested in material culture, how people dress themselves. Still really feel that way. I think it's still really relevant. And so started sewing first when I was young because it's so accessible. Hand sewing is just so accessible. So I would sew like big hippie patches on the front of my jeans. Our altar t-shirts, that was really big in the 80s and 90s more. And then as I got older, I learned to knit when I was about 20, and got kind of hooked into the early knitting community through Ravelry, was an early adopter on Ravelry, and then just spent all my time at my corporate career, like looking up patterns on my free time, looking up and printing patterns. And then ended up, I would always alter patterns, take them apart and make them work for me. And once I sort of transitioned out of corporate career, I had plans to stay in corporate, but then when I had my kids, just kind of realized I wanted to stay home instead. So we made that decision really quickly. Totally broke. So I had these little kids that I wanted to dress. Like, I don't know if you remember Misha and Puff, but it's this beautiful designer knitwear, hand knit. And I really wanted to have my kids looking like they were in Misha and Puff, but we didn't have any money. So I would like go to the budget shop and take apart adult clothing and sew that back together, or go find some thrifted yarn and knit a sweater. So my kids were all dressed in handmade clothes and handmade knitted sweaters when they were young. And that's how I kind of first discovered this group of women who sewed and knitted for work, which was really exciting. So early on, I used to be part of like a paid blog situation where I would sew clothing for my kids. We would do collections. And then that female entrepreneur was able to pay us to do that. So I kind of got started there, but I was still knitting all along. And as part of that, just noticed there weren't the kind of high quality bags in the available for knitters. So I started to design bags like that and was selling them to my knitter friends. Like Marais has one of my bags, leather and Pendleton wool bags, and I really loved doing that. But I did get tired of like having to sew the same thing over and over again.
Yep.
And it's a different
because then it becomes production sewing.
Right, production sewing. And I knew I knew I just didn't want to. I did enjoy it at the time. It was really fun. It was intense. You get up at like 4:30 in the morning and sew a bunch, then take care of kids and go to the mailbox, then put the kids to bed. So again, I guess that would have been the same thing with knitting, but eventually decided in about 2018, I think was when I released my first pattern. It's called the Headway Hat. It's a cabled hat. And I guess Headway was just like, I'm going to make headway in this new, see how this goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you feel like it took off right away? Like,
no, I don't think it took off right away, although there was a little yarn shop that opened in town soon after I started releasing patterns. It's called Dappled Fern, and she really pushed my patterns to local people, which really helped. I will say I designed the Fogline shawl in the winter of, I think it was 2018, so right after that. And so that is a big rectangle with a really engaging slip stitch pattern. But so that was my second ever pattern to release. And I knitted it with Spin Cycle yarn and the Farmer's Daughter yarn. And I don't even know how this happened. I think Candace from the Farmer's Daughter. Go ahead.
I was going to say, is that because they reached out to you?
Yes.
Did you know them?
No, okay. I didn't. I had ordered yarn from them in the past, but I certainly didn't know them. And I think I must have posted a sneak peek or something on Instagram. And Candace reached out right away and said, I love this pattern and I want to make one. And also I have a really kick-ass tech editor. Do you need one? And I'm like, yeah, all of that. Because my first pattern, I have since had it tech edited, but I didn't at the time. I didn't even know how you did that.
No, yeah, for sure.
And so that was a huge shot in the arm.
Because that one kind of blew up.
That one really blew up. So that was really fun. And I probably wouldn't have even released it because, I don't know, confidence. It takes a while to like get going with that stuff. And actually my tech editor, Jess, she's since opened, her own mill, and I can't think of the name right now, but I could tell you so I can link it. But she really mentored me. I mean, she went way above and beyond tech editing and was very encouraging to me. And like Tressa Widenar, I don't know if you know her. She has some beautiful Fair Isle patterns. Okay, and then I think there was like one other person. Anyway, she ended up like mentoring the three of us. We all got in about the same time and had kind of a nice little intimate group that would share ideas back and forth. And so that's what really just kind of kept me going, was community more than anything. And I will say other knitting designers in the community like Tiff or like Andrea Mowry have always been just like so supportive. I try not to bother them too much, but if I have a question, I think this field like happens a lot in the shadows where it's hard to know how to, like, for example, you're doing a book proposal. What should you charge for a designer fee? Well, I have no idea. And designers charge anywhere from $50 to $6,000, so they've been really helpful in saying like, here's some ideas you might want to ask about this. Now I'm kind of on a tangent, but anyway, that's kind of how I got started.
No, I've been doing the podcast for 6 years and I have kind of told this story, but you're on a lone island out there going, what's a style sheet? What do my patterns need to look like? Where's a tech editor? Where do I find test knitters? Like, and then you're also like, are my patterns hitting? Like, are they written? Are they well written? They're well written for me, but maybe, and so when I met Stephanie Lotvin of and Lisa Ross, Paper Daisy Creations and Telly Bean Knits out of Indiana. That's what they did. Like they kind of, hey, if you have questions, and I jumped right in with writing a book. That's the first.
Wow.
I did a pattern after I decided to write a book. So I was drowning, like literally drowning, going, I'm all in here, but I don't know what I'm doing, and we hired a graphic designer who walked us through. We hired a stylist who walked us through. We hired photographer Gail Zucker, did our photography because she's from Minnesota originally, and she came back and did our and that's how we learned, like from people who were willing, we were paying them, those people. But Stephanie and Lisa like saved me, and as far as pattern writing goes. But I knew the teacher side because I'd been teaching knitting for years and teaching in small shops and traveling. So then when they wanted to start teaching, then they were like, hey, can we pick your brain about what you charge to teach at an event, to go to an event? How do you get, and so then it felt more mutual, like I could give back a little to them because I had been glomming for so long. But absolutely, if there's not someone to lift you up, it's really stressful, I think, behind the scenes to kind of put the time and energy into a pattern and then maybe not have it even sell at all. Because, my first pattern that went viral was a sampler that I did for beginner knitters. And it is still one of my most popular, and all it is a cowl in the round with samples on it. But because we turned it on end and made it look like books on the library shelf, the stripes, then I did cowls that matched books that I love. I used yarns that matched. And so people who knit in the library, were librarians, loved the library, have knitting groups in the library, they all were like, this is great. And I'm like, this wasn't meant for like for big publication, right? Like this was for my beginners as their next step to learn some textured stitches. So then that would not have been, and then some patterns where you're super excited and you think this is going to be great. It's not what the public is looking for in the moment. So yeah, I totally get what you're saying. You weren't on a tangent at all as far as like how I talk, because I agree 100%. So then you do a lot of sweater design.
I was just going to say, yeah, I like to wear a lot of sweaters. And so like, as you're talking about beginner designs, and I was just thinking about, I love books too. So I love that connection. And I don't really come at patterns I try not to, I mean, of course it's in my mind, like, who's my audience? Like, who will this appeal to? But ultimately, I just try to trust that the story I'm trying to tell is going to resonate with someone, and it might not resonate with other people. And if I just really stay true to like something that I want to wear, then hopefully other people will want to wear it too. So I mostly design sweaters because I like to wear a lot of sweaters, and I enjoy that design. I do try to, for every larger pattern that I put out, this is where the reluctant swatcher comes in. I try to design a pattern, a partner pattern that's a wearable swatch. So for this sweater the Tryst sweater that I just released on Friday,
yep,
I'm designed a cowl that has the little stitch pattern. I don't know how much of it you can see, but that has that same stitch pattern. The idea being that if you weren't ready to dive into a sweater pattern, you could knit the cowl first to see if you get gauge. And I didn't come up with this idea, but to my knowledge, I'm the first designer that has made a point of having all these companion patterns with her sweaters. And so, but this is Elizabeth Zimmerman's idea. She said to make an experimental cap, she would call it. If you're reluctant to swatch, make a hat. And then if it doesn't fit you, give it to someone else and make another one. So you feel like all of your work has utility. You're not necessarily just knitting a circle or a square and then it's a throwaway. You can actually use it for something. So I love that idea. And so although I do design mostly sweaters, I do try to include a companion project with most of my larger projects. So that's my ongoing goal. If I ever did write a book, I would definitely do, swatch pattern plus sweater pattern.
Yeah, So am the opposite. So I will put out a sweater and then I will put out the companion pieces to the sweater. Like after the fact, I'm like, why didn't I do a hat? I should have done a hat and a cowl. And so then I do a hat and a cowl that matches kind of after the fact. And so it is, you could certainly use them now as swatches, but that is not, I never had that brilliant idea of doing it kind of in cahoots with the other piece, right? Like it never dawned on me. Although I'm much older than you, and I am a big fan of Elizabeth Zimmerman and her, her style. And I've taken classes and watched all the online videos from back in the day when she used to be on PBS. And so, I would have certainly been abreast of that information and never made that connection. So it's brilliant. It's brilliant, Brienne. Now, Brienne and I have a very different aesthetic. Brienne is natural, into nature and fiber. I think a lot of your designs are very more neutral, and you do a lot of texture in your sweaters, right? And I am bright colors, always doing color work. As you can see, just like even by what we're wearing, like I tend toward, and we were talking about that a little bit this weekend about how different people see color. And if it's, someone had talked about the rods and in your eyes and the prisms in your eyes, and that I have fewer in my eyes, so that I need more color visually because I don't see them quite the same as everyone else. And that people who are into neutrals have more rods or cones or prisms in their eyes. And so it's not, I mean, it is a preference, but it's also what you're visually seeing. And I think you growing up in the woods, you were talking about camping in the woods, spending time outside in the summer, all summer, being outside. You're a runner, you're a biker, like you're seeing neutrals, right? I have always lived in a city, always. And so I see brights in my landscapes, right? I see tons of Christmas lights. I see lots of neon signs, right? And so,
and I think that's been a bit of a progression for me, because if you look at my earlier designs, I think my first sweater pattern ever was neon pink and black. And maybe my first collaboration with the Wild Hand in Philadelphia, it was like an everything on it, like all over color work. And I've been kind of slowly like walking it back. Although I have two like all over color work sweaters on my collaboration schedule for the year. But yeah, I would agree. I think what I am more likely to wear is a neutral sort of deal. So I was realizing that like, I'm making these great sweaters that are really fun to knit, but I'm more likely to wear a white sweater.
Right. Absolutely. And
I do love, like, if you look at my yarn library, it's all full of neon pink and, construction orange. I love orange right now. I love your sweater. That's so fun. So yeah, there's sort of an interesting thing happening there too. Cause I think also we want, something that's, different from what we have and what we have access. So that bright, colorful stuff is really, I know Stephen West coined this hashtag, which is neon realness, and I still love neon. It's so fun.
Yeah, I just think that I have a fisherman's sweater in my stat, right? But I don't gravitate toward it as often, right? Like I have a all over dark gray bobbled vest. It's beautiful. Don't wear it that often, right? So yeah. I've knit those things, not necessarily designed in those, but I also know that when we're designing, we have to think about what other people want to wear. And there are far fewer people out there who have the bright palette. They like a pop of color. They not necessarily do they want to wear it all over, right? So I'm going to put the picture in of your new Tryst sweater. Do you want to talk briefly about your last couple of years, your collaboration with Sam?
Sure. So let's see. So our first year collaborating together, and I designed the plant people sweater for Sweater Camp, which is where we just were over the weekend in Stillwater. Yep. And that had, plant style motif, I thought, on a circular yoke. And I think Stillwater, Darn It Anyway, did a class after that for people to knit that sweater. So that was really fun. That's in Sam's Yak DK. So it's a yak yarn. And then this year, this is the Tryst sweater that I'm wearing, and designed it pretty late into 2024, just as the world was shifting, needing an escape. And so designed the sweater with that in mind. This yarn can go from DK to bulky, and the gauge is 4.25 per inch. So it knits up pretty quickly. And the yarn that I used this year, I think the yardage is like 284. So you don't need that many skeins to make a sweater. So Sam and I were like, oh yeah, like this knits quick. It's nice and soft. So the process of the knitting is really pleasant.
Yeah. And it's her new blown base, right?
Yes. Whipped bulky, it's called. Yep.
But it isn't really a bulky. Like she's calling it bulky, which I think is a bit deceiving, because it really can work up. I really think it works up more to like that DK Erin, right?
I think it's versatile. That's been my experience with it, because I tried it at a couple different gauges. You could knit it at like a bulkier, more Erin gauge because of that blown construction, because it kind of fills in the space.
Yes. Yeah.
But I guess in general, I tend towards like a firmer gauge. So that for this one, 4.25. I mean, that's still pretty big. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. But it's not three stitches to the inch, right?
Not 3 stitches. No, I don't think so. And this has a little bit of nylon in it, so I find it really holds its shape nicely, which was a nice surprise because it's very soft. So I knew it would drape, but I didn't expect it to hold the stitch patterns as well as it does, and just its shape in general. It's durable,
I saw Sam's on Thursday night, because we came out on Thursday night and we went to dinner. Bonnie and I, who sat at our table, the long blonde hair. So Bonnie and I went out.
Oh, to Bonnie with the special K bars. Yes, right.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Bonnie with the special K bars. So she knits in my knitting group now because she retired, and so I've gotten to know her. But she and I were just gushing over the green that Sam was doing her sample of your Tryst sweater out of. And Sam was like, no, this is just a color for me. And we're like, no, that is a color for us too. It was this acidy lime, dark limey green, and she was doing all the yoke, and she wanted to get the yoke done so she could have it on display. And she was at the bottom of all that yoke, and it was stunning. So we got a little bit of that whipped bulky experience prior to showing up at the, and it all sold out before we even bought any. Like as soon as it was there, it was like gone. And I don't know that she knew that it would be quite so popular right away. And so she sends it to Darn It Anyway. They order. So it wasn't necessarily her booth, but it sold really fast, which is lovely. Do you know if a lot of people bought sweaters quantities? Because
I think they did.
I assume that's why it went so quickly,
Yeah, I think they did.
I definitely want to get some of that. It was beautiful. It's a beautiful base.
I think coming next year for Sweater Camp, the goal is to get a sweater designed up by the fourth quarter of the year, so that if people wanted to make a sweater and then wear it to Sweater Camp, we could have that kind of solidarity.
That's what I did we went up to the Up North Fiber Retreat in Bemidji with Sam, and we stayed together. It was Bonnie and Tiffany, who was at our table, and Renee, who was at our table, and I, and another friend anyway, and they knit my Marais shawl to wear to the retreat with Sam's DK yak from the year before. Great. And I designed it the year before, but then they were like, you are coming, Sam's coming. You did that. And that was lovely to have all those people show up, in their shawls using Sam's yarn, because then I did a class and then Sam spoke. So then, so that's perfect, because I would totally knit a sweater to go to an event like that, especially when both people are going to be there, right?
Oh, that's great.
It's that knitting connection. Like when I walked in, I didn't know these people, but they're wearing my Marais shawl. I design a lot of stuff for advanced beginners because I mostly teach beginner knitters. And so a lot of my stuff is just like a step above then it's like to learn something. And so it just has a simple cable along the edge, and then picked up stitches and a rib and a little cable at the point. Worked the short way end to end, because my beginners and advanced beginners, they stay with me afterwards, but they get overwhelmed by long giant shawl rows, right? Like they're like, I really would like to make a shawl. So I was like, well, we can do it short so your rows don't ever get super long. So after you did the Fogline shawl, was the triangular shawl first or the other one?
No, the rectangular first.
Yeah.
And then just in 2024, I designed the triangular version of it. That was last year. Yep.
But then you also have, isn't there a cowl too?
Or yep, there's a couple cowls actually. There's one with a Moibus twist in it. And then there is, what else? A sweater.
There's a mitts. You have Fogline hat, mitts,
yep.
Mitts, pullover, shawl, triangle shawl, right?
And then maybe rivaling the Fogline shawl, the rectangular one now is the sideline wrap, which is it goes like, on your head, like a head wrap. A lot of people have made that one because Spin Cycle did a knit along for that this summer.
Okay, I'm marking that down, so I'll put a picture in of that too while we're talking about it.
Thank you, Cori. Yeah.
Crazy. I know I keep looking down, but like I printed out all of your patterns so I could look like, I want to pimp out your patterns a little bit, but that way it was easier for me to like keep track of what we talked about. And then I looked through them all, and it gave me a chance to really kind of deep dive on, what you like to design and what you were doing. So that's why I'm marking stuff down as we're talking, so that some notes so that I remember.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a paper person too. I can appreciate that. I'm doing a collaboration with Spin Cycle right now, and I just could not pick which yarn. And so I wrote the names of like all 70 of their current colorways down. I crossed off the ones I would never use. There aren't many. And then started ranking the rest of them 1 through 10. And then, it took me hours to narrow down the list because I was like, this is just too hard. It's like a candy store,
Right. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know which ones she's going to want to talk about. Absolutely. But we missed, I'm going to edit out we had a little couple things we had to talk about at the beginning. So we missed the part that you were literally up north at a meet with your children, and you're in a chalet. So you're trying to do this.
Yes, it's an alpine ski meet. It's sections today for the kids. So yeah.
Yeah. And your kids attend the local high school or the charter?
The local high school. Yep.
Okay. But you homeschooled when they were young.
I did. Yeah. I homeschooled them when they were young until 7th and 8th grade. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what another friend of mine kind of did.
Okay, and they could still participate on the high school sports team, so that was pretty fun. They could go do like we don't travel any less than 2 hours. Like our closest meet is 2 hours away, so that was a kind of special time because they would be maybe at a ski meet all day. Like this morning, my kids got on the bus at 5:20 to come over here. And they'll get home not too late. Actually, they'll be home by 6 or so by dinner time. But when they were littler, that would really exhaust them. So it was nice that they could just get up and do schoolwork in their jammies. They didn't have to. Now the push is a little more now that they're in high school, but they love high school. It's been a nice transition for them.
So my viewers will know that I interviewed this summer Jamie Rex of North Road Knits, because I was up in Grand Marais, which I have a story about that, but we were staying up the trail, up the Gunflint Lodge. We were staying at the Bearskin Lodge up the trail, and she came up with her husband, and then I interviewed her in my cabin because they wanted to come up the trail and go to dinner. And so I interviewed her, and she had the same experience with her kids going to high school and being on the team, and how far they have to drive to go to the events. They played hockey and football, and they were, you're driving these huge distances to go to practice and, all of that. So are your kids old enough to drive?
My son has his permit, but he's not technically old enough to drive. He was home over the weekend when I was at sweater camp, and we had a ton of snow. So he did plow for us illegally, but he technically does not have his license yet. But my husband has a construction business. And so our kids have been driving heavy equipment for some time, but he'll officially get his license in August. Okay. So no, it's all us legally for the time being, is us driving.
Yeah. So knitting time in the car. Can you knit in the car?
Totally. Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
So anyway, I wanted to say that she is literally at an event where her kids are participating right now in order to do this. So because she's as busy as I am, and we were struggling to get a kind of a time lockdown where we could actually do this together. What are you wearing, a hat that matches the sweater?
This is the Sunday Times hat, and it doesn't go with this sweater. I designed this for Taproot magazine, which has since stopped publishing, sadly. That was an awesome magazine. But yeah, it's called the Sunday Times hat, and the theory is that you could knit it as fast as you could read the Sunday Times from cover to cover, which is kind of a
Oh,
long time, actually. It would take you quite a
is it
while, actually, to read the whole paper.
is it okay, I'm gonna mark that. Is it still available though through you on Ravelry, I
Yep.
assume, since you
Yep.
publish with them? So do you want to talk a little bit about how you've gotten into designing for Farmer's Daughter, Spin Cycle, and then Taproot? Like, do they usually, people are interested in that, I think. Do they usually reach out to you, or do you ask for a yarn collaboration?
That's a great question, and I agree. I think people are wondering about that. So how it started was dyers would reach out to me. But I have gotten a lot more bold. I mean, what do you have to lose? You just
Yep.
so these days it goes both ways. I get plenty of requests to, can we send you this yarn? Will you make something with it? That happens plenty, but I also, if I have an idea, I have kind of a lot of ideas like on a spreadsheet. I'll just pull one forward and then go take a look, see what yarn would go with it. And I think for designers, something to keep in mind, or aspiring designers, I think something to keep in mind is that these dyers need kind of a long lead time. So the more time you can give them, like I have an idea for a sweater, here it is. It's a top-down yoked sweater with color work. I want to release it, say it's October, I want to release it in July. Would you be willing to offer yarn support? I think most companies are open to that. Because the way that they get people to buy their yarn is by having a pattern to go with that yarn, that really helps.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I find that too.
Yeah, so I would say both ways.
When I first started, I wasn't asking, I was just buying. Now I ask, or they reach out and they say, we have a new yarn base. And they never say no. Like,
No.
they're usually pretty good about it. But I do think that I will send a proposal that's pretty detailed. And then here are my designs. I have a podcast. Here's my Instagram, right? So it's not just a person that has never designed anything asking for yarn. I think that would maybe be a little bit more difficult, but
but I would say it's worth a try. I mean, you never know. Sometimes they have a new base going out that they just want to get into the world. I mean, I always tell people, I was talking to an aspiring designer over the weekend, and she's like, yeah, I'll design that once I take a grading course. And I was like, I'm not saying you shouldn't do your best, but don't wait. Like, ship your work, right? Ship your work. Like, do your best and then put it out there. I mean, you should do your best, but you don't have I think women especially, we want a master's degree before we do anything. Well, there isn't a master's degree in pattern design, and some of it you have to learn along the way. I am so grateful that I have had really excellent testers and really serious tech editors. And I'm like very perfectionist, like type A. So that helps too. But I also think it's a very democratic process. I mean, patterns are like between $5 and $10. And yes, you should do your best. I mean, and it's between $5 and $10. And like, I don't know. I think you should ship your work. I think you should dive in if you're interested and give it a try. I mean, there's so many different ways to do it. You could sell to a small group of people. You could sell at a low price point. Make sure you have 20 people to test it. My first tests were huge because I just wanted to make sure. Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? It's like, yes, for sure. It totally works. It's totally clear. So all of that stuff can be really, and at first, it's just my friends that would test. But yes, in terms of asking for yarn, I mean, you never know. I do think like it definitely helps to have a proposal. And then once you establish yourself a little bit, you end up working with the same dyers frequently, which is great. It's a nice relationship.
Your website is stunning. Do you do it?
No, I don't. Actually, there's a woman in town who I used to babysit who does it for me. Okay. And I am woefully bad. I should know I never update the pictures or my patterns, unfortunately, because I think most people look at my stuff on Instagram.
Yep.
So I'm pretty good about updating that, but I wish I were better about designing
No,
the
I just
website.
think
But
that
yeah, she's great.
your aesthetic is really nice and your pictures are really clean. You take great pictures. Do you have someone in your life that's doing your photography?
My husband or my kids. My kids are pretty good too. My son and daughter take a lot, but my husband mostly. And I'm, believe it or not, I mean, I'm pretty bossy in terms of art direction. So we'll take hundreds. And I'm like, no, no, not like that. Not if my chin is like this. And look at my face. I can't be making that face. You got to tell me. And if my hair's like this, you got to flip it off. So I
Yep.
think some of the best parts about the photo shoots now is actually the video that goes along with it because you see how kind of ugly it gets behind the scenes where you're just, ugh, you know. But yeah, my husband took a lot of the early ones, and now my kids have a pretty good eye for it too. They are photographing their whole lives all the time, so they tend to have even a better
Yep.
eye than my husband
Yep.
and I do for what works.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's why those in-person events, like the one we were just at over the weekend, I mean, there just is nothing like it. I mean, Zoom is great, and the internet is great, and the photographs of me, running across your screen, that's all great, but there is nothing like meeting people in person. I mean, was able to tell everyone that my faux pas sweater that I had there, it's a bright orange sweater. And I designed that sweater in memoriam of the sweater camp that we had just been at, where a lot of women were talking about their health and about being hot. So that sweater has some underarm vents, and I called it the faux pas sweater because I think women's health is often like, ooh, we shouldn't talk about it when we really should. So I was so fun to be able to connect with people who had been there last year and remembered that story, and they're like, oh, I didn't realize that's why it was called that, even though it's in the pattern description or whatever. I
Right.
wouldn't really
Yeah.
connect. I wouldn't really connect with that either unless someone told me the story face to face. So that's just such a gift to be able to be in person with other knitters in community. Just thought that was so cool that someone put the message out Friday night. Okay, tomorrow's overalls day. And it seems like a silly little thing, a bunch of 300 knitters were wearing overalls on Saturday. And I'm like, it seems like nothing, but what does it say about us? It says we're ready to roll up our sleeves. It says we want pockets. It says we want a garment that we feel comfortable and party in, and it also says if you can get this many people to do something, like what could we do? What could this group do? Like it's pretty exciting, right? Like you need a group of
Amazing.
citizens for a
Yeah.
cause. We're right here for you. Like I do think knitters hold each other to a pretty high, I'll say moral, there must be a better word for it, but ethical standard. And I'm here for it. I'm so proud to be a part of that and to learn along the way. I think it's a really interesting group of people.
Absolutely. I think that grew out of the fact that the shop people bought overalls and they were all these cute little designs on all the overalls and they were wearing them at the shop and at some events. And then people would come in and say, oh, where did you get those overalls? Oh, they're from here because I went and bought a pair. My friend Mary, who was sitting across the table, she bought a pair. Renee had a
Yeah.
pair. But a year ago or 2 years ago, we bought these overalls and then they were going to wear them. And it just turned into this kind of so many people. I didn't count in that picture, but there's a picture out there. Do you think it was like 50?
I don't know, but it was a lot. And I mean, I think if you look back, like I was, history was my minor in college and material culture. That's what we're participating in is material culture. It's not nothing. It's craft. It's something we do with our hands, but the way that we represent ourselves in the world, it means something. I just watched, It Ends With Us. Have you seen that yet?
Just finished it
Oh
yesterday.
my God, her clothes in that movie, Cori, I was dying. I love her clothes, those hand knitted hats and the thrifted. Well, she picked a lot of her costumes and she's getting all kinds of flack online for not taking her role seriously. The topic is domestic abuse.
Right.
And as someone whose mom was an advocate growing up, that was her whole job. I can tell you that victims of domestic abuse come in every shape and size. They are lawyers, they are professors, they are flower shop owners. And the idea that she should be wearing like funeral black, it makes me so mad. But there's an example of how like costume had a huge impact on the effect of that movie and what people are saying about that movie. And that's
But
what
it
I
was
love about.
also her costumes were very contradictory. Like she had on a silky sheath dress with like a burlap coat. Like
Yeah.
she would walk in like it was very eclectic, but yeah, she was marrying like sexy dressed up with like low down country, like I'm
Yes.
just comfortable here, and then her hair would go from being very coiffed, whatever, to like
Yeah.
a hot mess. Like it, yeah, definitely.
And
She's
I love
going
that
through.
we are all so many things, right? There's no binary. If we learn anything from this generation, there is no binary. Like it is all over the place and good for her. It's like let's push these things together and see where they balance and see where they clash. And like that's what makes things interesting, right? Like that's what makes material culture interesting, right? Cowboy Carter, like Beyonce just won. A lot of people say she didn't deserve it because it wasn't a country album. I'm like, who decides? She says
Yeah,
it is, it is.
yeah,
She gets to
yeah.
decide and people get to listen, and that's what makes it so great. And I don't know, I think that's what's exciting about our industry is we get to hear these stories and be in community with people and maybe tell a little bit of the story with our designs. And that's where you hope your design resonates with someone. I mean, yeah, I do hope, this Tryst sweater, I really do hope it brings someone some comfort this season, a little break. That's what I like my call to people when they buy this pattern. It's like carve away a little time for yourself. Like go find a soft place to sit and knit on this for a little while. Or knit it while you're listening to the news, but like let that rhythm keep you rolling. Have your nervous system be soothed by this both hands moving. I don't know. Yeah, now I'm tangent again, but
No,
and I think that's a lot of like what teaching and designing is. It's an invitation. I always tell people like it's a loose structure and you should make it yours. Like there are no rules. If you want to I mean, there are some rules to, there's gauge, there is gauge,
yeah, yeah,
but that's if you want a sweater that fits. If you don't care, then don't worry about it. But I care. I want it to fit. But you can, like you said, you can make the sleeves longer, you can make the yoke deeper, and you should put it on. They say, well, what size should I make? I'm like, go measure your favorite sweatshirt and you should make that size because it'll surprise you. It'll be smaller than you expect it to be, or it'll be bigger.
yeah.
So now that's the bust size, not just because the pattern says, recommended 2 inches of ease.
2 inch.
Like you do the ease you want,
Yes, yes. If you do not want to knit with the recommended or the right amount of ease, which I think that's how people read it, right? They read it
Right.
as the right amount of ease, right?
Right.
As
And that's
opposed
really
to,
individual. If you like my daughter wears all oversized, so she wouldn't like that. She wants 6 inches of ease. Well, great. So then I know, I'm going to make her size +6 or whatever. Her
yeah,
bust,
yeah, yeah.
I like to wear things more fitted, so I tend to size down. I just like the way that feels in general. Now this one was more oversized, and I have one other. I'm sort of leaning in the direction of oversized again, but it depends on the season too.
Oh, for sure. But then people can pick, right? Just because it
Yes.
fits me like this doesn't mean it has to fit you that way. I mean, unless you're going for that, but we don't even have the same body. So how
Right.
you can't like my fit because you don't have the boobs I have, right? Like what, like that, like I
Well
got
put.
girls.
Yes.
So like it's not going to fit you the same. I'm sorry, you're flat chested or whatever, so now I'm not sorry someone's flat chested. As I've gotten older and I got more and more busty, I would give that up in heartbeat.
I
But
hear you.
so sometimes hard, but yeah. So, okay. Any other designs that come to mind that you kind of want to hit on before we kind of wrap it up here? Like,
I know.
is there a
So
couple of cowls that didn't you do a cowl or a pattern for Harriet and Alice?
So that is called the hot dish cowl. They had a signature spin cycle colorway made for them based on some pictures of sunsets that Kate sent them. And it's a Mobius cowl called the hot dish cowl. And that's
Okay,
that
I'll put the
same,
picture in.
that's
I've
kind of
seen it
my,
and I bought that. The yarn is spectacular.
it is, it's beautiful. It's really fun to knit with. So that's my kind of
It's
signature
orange
stitch
and
pattern.
raspberry, which
Yeah,
has a lot of
exactly.
orange and raspberry in it. Although the skeins, of course, really vary
Yeah.
from in spin cycle, but yeah.
And so I think that stitch pattern that I use on my Fogline patterns, or the hot dish pattern or the sideline wrap, it's all the same stitch pattern. And I think that stitch pattern works really well with that shifting yarn. It's really forgiving. It's got these nice graphic grid lines going down that kind of hold it all together.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to tell the story of seeing you knitting on the shore when we were up there last summer in July. So Ross and I were up at the Bearskin Lodge, which we've been going to since we were first married, off and on. We stayed at the Bearskin, and we would go up and we'd cross country ski, and then we'd go up and portage. And I would just struggle along, but he loves to portage and fish. And so we would stay. and off and on over the years. And we hadn't been back in a number of years after COVID, and we finally decided to go back. And then we were so like, when you get to a certain point in upper Minnesota, the atmosphere changes. Like it is, you're just out of the city, I guess, but it's just like the trees get in your whole, like everything just settles and calm. And we get into that cabin and the trees are rustling, right? I have 2 rustling trees that I put in my backyard because I wanted that sound in my city. You know, the kind of the willows, that the quaking trees or whatever. But we got up there, and then friends of ours, Mary, who sat at the table across from
I know Mary. Yep.
Mary Eswick. She and her husband were going to be up there because they bought land. Yes, she talked to you because they bought land up there. I think that's okay for me to share that anyway, because that's their favorite place on earth. And we're going to be over crossing. So Mike and Ross, our husbands, were going to portage together for a day or two, and Mary and I were going to meet up. And we went to the Angry Trout to eat dinner. We were meeting up with them the night before so the guys could make a plan what time they wanted to meet to portage for the day. And we look over and Brienne is knitting on the shore in a big Adirondack chair, sitting on a rock. I'm not sure, which I have seen you do often on your Instagram feed, right? Like you are attracted to the water too, and you've been down there. But I was like, we're like, that's Brienne. And so we go trucking over like, Brienne, like kind of the city folk we are, the loud city folk, you know, and you're like, oh yeah, I totally remember you guys. And we're like, yeah, we sat with you, you know, at sweater camp, and we're, you know, just wanted to say hi. And then you were knitting on a sweater that was going to come out that last fall, maybe.
Yep, the Orna sweater. Yep, it's a
Orna
cable, all over cable sweater. Yep.
You were knitting on that, and we had our knitting with us, and so we go into the restaurant and we sit down, and this is how it just was funny to me, because my husband, who was sitting at the table with us, looks over and she goes, Mary, Cori, that lady over there is knitting, and we had just gone and talked to you, and like we had left them and walked over, and then we had come back and we're like, oh, that was Brienne. We met her. And then he notices half an hour later, and it's, you know, I just was like, honey, if it would have been an old car, he would have seen it like that. But because it was a knitting,
our husbands share that. Our husbands share that interest. Yes. My husband just said to me, he's like, where are you going? She's racing in 10 minutes. I'm like, I'm on a podcast. I told you that 5 times. Oh yeah. Just went right over his head.
Okay. Well, I'm going to say goodbye because you're missing something important, I'm sure, here. And I feel bad, but I'm glad we got to chat.
Well, this was great. Thank you, Cori.